All right, welcome back to Concepts and Principles in the Christian Kenpo system. My name is Chris. Glad you could continue to join us in this series. Today we're going to be looking at the technique Obscure Kimono in the Christian Kenpo system as we talk about the methods, catalysts, intent, weapons to targets, concepts and principles, and the lessons contained in this technique. First off, let's talk about the catalyst and intent of this technique. This is the when-then technique. This is the first when-then in the Christian Kenpo system. When-then techniques are hugs, holds, locks, grabs, and chokes. All of those that require when our opponent does this, then we do this. It's a conditional statement in which we place on all of those techniques in which require a response after the initial catalyst has been initiated. There are no attempted chokes. There are no attempted locks. There's no attempted chokes. There's no attempted holds. They either are or they are not. That is the catalyst and intent. This is coming from the yellow attack zone. We talked about the green being from 12 to either 9:30 or 2:30. This is our first yellow zone attack in yellow belt, coming from either 9:30 or 2:30 to 4:30 and 7:30 on the clock is the yellow zone, where we're using predominantly more of our peripheral vision and our other senses to determine where our opponent is. We're also going to be using things such as purposeful compliance, rotational force, framing, marriage of gravity, and obscure zone theory in this technique. We'll get to those once we start talking about the C&P in this. But before we get there, let's talk about the method by which we're using in our lower half motion. Because this is a push, a grab, and then a pull motion to pull us into the intent of the attack, which is not the grab, which is the follow-up sucker punch, is as I'm getting pushed, I don't see it because he's behind me. I'm going to purposefully go with the pull to initiate my defense. This is what we call purposeful compliance. I'm going to purposely comply with their wishes and stepping behind my opponent. That is the method. I'm going to go with it. I'm going to find my balance in and through my opponent. I'm going to not try and stop his motion by using stutter steps or shuffling. I'm going to go with the motion because I know that I can respond in a way that will be effective. Let us talk once again for a moment about catalyst and intent. He's coming up from behind you. Maybe you're at a gathering, or maybe you're at a family event and Uncle John's toasted. It's normally a push, a grab, and a pull into some type of either a roundhouse, a haymaker, or a bashing over the head. We need to prevent the intent of the backup arm before it comes into play. With that, I'm going to have Jarek come up and join me for a moment. He's going to be at my 4:30. He's going to come up slowly. He's going to grab. He's going to push. I'm going to purposefully go with it. Notice as I go with it, what does that do? That increases his depth and his width at the same time. I'm canceling his height, width, and depth, and he doesn't know it. As he pulls, I'm going to go along that same line of action and step before he comes up with this. I'm going to step behind his leg to try and continue to cancel height, width, and depth using what we call a leg check. It also helps me gauge distance between Jarek and I. If we end up hip to hip, I know exactly where he is and I know exactly where his arm is. If I don't have hip to hip contact, I know where he is. I don't even have to look to know where Jarek is on my clock principle. Once he's pulled me in and I know that at that point that intent is coming, I'm going to do what's called framing. Framing is where we use our body in such a way that as we rotate and as our body is fused in this position, I'm going to fuse my right inward block and a left punch, either a thrust punch or a 45-degree punch. And it's going to strike whatever it may be on the way. I don't know what's coming. I don't know if in this case, he's using a large roundhouse. I don't know if he's going to try and come up and over, and my inward block is going to end up serving as the block for the second one, and then he's showing me a different target. I don't know. I'm going into what we would call the dark, literally. Darkness and dark. So I've stepped behind. I've checked that leg. I'm now framed. I'm going to strike whatever it may be. As I do so, before we introduce the extension, I'm going to continue to push him back on his back heel, sweep, and exit. Let us also look at marriage of gravity within this technique. So Jarek grabs, he pushes, I step back. Marriage of gravity is, right now my right back heel is up. As I plant that heel, I'm using gravity to my advantage. As I then, with framing, block and strike at the same time. Whatever targets become available. Closest weapon, closest target. And then continue the technique. Once again, all of this is to my obscura zone. This is the first technique in the Christian Kenpo system where either the attack is in the obscura zone or the defense is in the obscura zone. This concept will become important as the next grab that you're going to learn, often called choo-choo train, starts off with the same grab. As he pulls in, elbow, hammer, elbow. All in my obscura zone. I only know that Jarek is there because of his hand and my elbow. That's the next obscura zone defense and attack that we'll be looking at coming up in purple belt. So we have looked at the method, the use of purposeful compliance, and a step through reverse motion to get that leg check. We've looked at the catalyst and intent, the push, the grab, the pull to the punch. We've looked at weapons to targets, whether my hand ends up, the vertical outward block ends up blocking the punch or whether it ends up striking his jaw. Either way is going to affect a target. The left hand is going to either hit the ribs or the sternum or whatever target is open. Closest weapon, closest target. The concepts and principles in this technique is when, then, attack, and defense. Yellow zone, obscure zone, purposeful compliance, going with the pull. Rotational force, as I rotate using my body mass to back up the weapons. Framing, using body fusion and my defenses and offenses to affect a result in my opponent. Marriage of gravity and using of the heel up, heel down motion to create added force to my block and to my strike. And the obscure zone theory in his attack and in my response to that attack. I hope that you guys have learned something. Hopefully you learn it, you understand it, and then you teach it. Whether it be in American Kenpo, Christian Kenpo, or Kaji Kenpo, that you take these concepts and principles and apply them to your art.